In the quiet, leafy town of Wayland, Massachusetts, people like to think nothing truly bad ever happened. It was the kind of place where kids rode bikes to the park, families waved to each other at the grocery store, and neighbors trusted one another. Before we start, please like and subscribe so you get more crime stories coming your way. But in the summer of 2011, that picture-perfect peace would be shattered forever. And it would all start with two teenagers who, on the surface, seemed like the ideal couple. Her name was Lauren Astley. She was just 18 years old, recently graduated from high school, and full of dreams about the future. Lauren was popular, funny, and loved by everyone who knew her. She sang in her school's a cappella group, spoke confidently about her goals, and had a smile that lit up every room. Her friends often said she had this energy that made you feel alive just being around her. Then there was Nathaniel Fujita. At 18, he was a star football player, tall, strong, and admired. To many people, Nate seemed to have everything: athletic skill, a loving family, and a bright future ahead. He and Lauren had been dating through high school, and to outsiders, they looked like the perfect match: popular girl, popular guy. A storybook romance. But behind the smiles, something darker was building. By the time summer arrived, their relationship had cracked apart. Lauren had broken things off. She wanted to move forward, to live her own life, to explore what came next after high school. But Nate? He couldn't let go. He spiraled into jealousy, depression, and obsession. Lauren's friends remembered how she confided in them. Nate wasn't handling the breakup well. He could be moody, angry, and distant. Still, she cared about him. She hoped maybe they could stay friends. After all, they had shared so much history. What she didn't know was that Nate's feelings weren't just sadness. They were boiling into something dangerous. All right, before we continue, smash that subscribe button. It takes a second, and it makes sure you never miss these crime stories. On July 3rd, 2011, Lauren's mother noticed something strange. Lauren said she was going out, but hours passed and she didn't return. Texts went unanswered. Calls rang and rang. For Lauren's family, panic started to set in. This wasn't like her. Lauren was responsible. She was the kind of girl who told her parents where she was, who kept in touch with her friends, who never just disappeared. Her mother, frantic, reached out to Lauren's friends. No one had seen her. And then the terrifying thought crept in. Could something terrible have happened? Police were soon notified. A search began. Neighbors, classmates, and volunteers all looked for the girl whose bright smile had been seen just the day before. The community came together, hoping she'd just turn up safe. But as the hours dragged into days, the fear grew heavier. And what they didn't know yet was that the person at the center of it all wasn't a stranger. He wasn't some shadow in the night. He was someone they all knew. Someone they trusted. Someone who had once been the most important person in Lauren's life. That someone was Nathaniel Fujita. The town of Wayland was about to discover that even in the safest places, even among the people you think you know best, danger can live right next door. As the search for Lauren Astley stretched into the evening, police began looking into the people closest to her. In cases like this, investigators always start with the inner circle: friends, family, and most importantly, former partners. It didn't take long for detectives to turn their attention to Nathaniel Fujita. After all, he and Lauren had just broken up. Breakups are often messy, and sometimes tragically they spark violence. At first, Nate's family tried to paint a picture of a young man simply struggling. His mother insisted he had been acting strangely, even depressed. His friends whispered about how he hadn't seemed like himself since the breakup. But police needed more than whispers. They needed evidence. And soon they found it. During a search near Nate's home, officers discovered a disturbing sight: bloody clothing hidden away. Shirts and shoes carefully stashed, but stained with something unmistakable. The lab would later confirm it was Lauren's blood. Then came the chilling discovery that shattered all hope. On July 4th, just a day after Lauren was reported missing, her body was found in a marshy area not far from Nate's house. She had been strangled and stabbed. Police now knew. This wasn't a missing persons case anymore. It was murder. The town of Wayland was stunned. Neighbors couldn't believe that the smiling football player they'd seen mowing the lawn or driving to practice could be capable of such horror. But the evidence was undeniable. According to prosecutors, here's what happened. On July 3rd, Nate lured Lauren to his home. He asked her to park away from the house so neighbors wouldn't see her car. Once inside, something snapped. Fueled by anger and heartbreak, Nate attacked Lauren, strangling and stabbing her. Then, in a calculated attempt to cover his tracks, he carried her body to the swamp and tried to hide it. The evidence painted a picture of planning. This wasn't a random outburst, it looked like he knew what he was going to do. But defense lawyers weren't so sure. They argued Nate was suffering from serious mental health problems. Depression, possible psychosis, even head injuries from years of playing football. Maybe, they suggested, he wasn't fully in control of his actions. Maybe he wasn't thinking clearly. The courtroom would become a battlefield, with Lauren's family demanding justice and Nate's lawyers insisting on mercy. But before the trial began, one question haunted everyone in Wayland. How could the boy who once held Lauren's hand at school dances, who whispered promises of forever, turn into the monster who ended her life? The answer would unfold in court, and it would shock everyone. By early 2013, nearly 2 years after Lauren's murder, the trial of Nathaniel Fujita began. The courthouse buzzed with reporters, neighbors, and grieving family members. For Lauren's parents, each day was a reminder of what they had lost. For Nate's family, it was the nightmare of seeing their son accused of an unthinkable act. The prosecution came out strong. They argued this was not a crime of passion but premeditated murder. They showed how Nate had asked Lauren to meet him privately, how he had hidden his bloody clothes, and how he tried to dump her body. Every move suggested careful planning. Witnesses described Nate's behavior in the days leading up to the murder. He was moody, angry, unable to accept that Lauren wanted to move on. To prosecutors, it was clear. He couldn't handle rejection, and when Lauren said goodbye for good, his rage boiled over into deadly violence. Then came the defense. They painted a different picture. A boy who was mentally ill, who wasn't thinking rationally, who might not have understood right from wrong. They brought in doctors who talked about depression, family history of schizophrenia, and possible brain injuries from football. The defense hinted at insanity. But the prosecution fought back. Their experts said Nate knew exactly what he was doing. They pointed to the way he cleaned up, the way he hid evidence, the way he tried to trick people. Those weren't the actions of someone lost in madness, they argued. Those were the actions of someone who knew murder was wrong, but chose to do it anyway. The trial was heartbreaking. Lauren's parents listened to every detail, reliving the worst day of their lives. Friends testified about Lauren's kindness, her laughter, the future that had been stolen. Finally, after weeks of testimony, it came down to the jury. Would they see Nate as a sick young man who needed help, or as a killer who needed to be punished? After hours of tense deliberation, the verdict was read: guilty of first-degree murder. The sentence was automatic: life in prison without parole. Gasps filled the courtroom. Lauren's parents wept, both relieved and devastated. Nate's family sat in silence, their son's future gone in an instant. The trial was over, but the scars it left on the community would never fade. With Nate behind bars, the town of Wayland tried to move forward. But how do you move on from a tragedy like this? If you're gripped by this story so far, make sure you hit that subscribe button. There are more chilling cases just like this coming your way. Lauren Astley was remembered as a shining light, a girl with dreams of singing, studying, and changing the world. Friends organized memorials. Her parents started speaking out about the warning signs of relationship violence, hoping to save other young people from the same fate. But questions still lingered. Could Nate's crime have been prevented? Were there signs no one noticed? Was this truly the act of a calculated killer, or the breakdown of a troubled mind? In 2014, Nate's lawyers appealed, challenging parts of the trial. The appeal failed. Then in 2024, more than a decade after the murder, reports surfaced that Nate was again seeking a new trial. But no matter the legal maneuvers, one truth remains. Lauren is gone, and nothing will bring her back. The case stands as a grim warning. Even in safe towns, even among people you think you know, darkness can hide. A breakup, something most teenagers go through, turned into a fatal obsession. At the heart of this story is a chilling reminder. Relationships can be dangerous when love turns into control, when heartbreak turns into rage. For the Astley family, the pain is permanent. Their daughter's smile now lives only in memories and photographs. But they continue to speak out, determined that Lauren's story will not be forgotten. And for Nathaniel Fujita, once the football star, once the boy with everything, his life now consists of prison walls, locked doors, and endless years to think about what he did. The town of Wayland will never forget the summer of 2011, when the perfect couple's story turned into a nightmare. Because in the end, this wasn't just the story of young love. It was the story of how love twisted into obsession, and how obsession turned deadly. A warning that sometimes, the person you trust the most can become the person you fear. The trial was over. The verdict was clear. Nathaniel Fujita would spend the rest of his life in prison. But for the families left behind, the story didn't end. In many ways, it was only beginning. For Lauren Astley's parents, every day without their daughter was like carrying a weight that never lifted. Lauren had been their only child. She was the one they had watched sing in concerts, graduate with pride, and laugh with her friends. Now her room was silent. Her phone would never ring again. At the same time, Nate's family was crushed as well. They loved him, but they also had to face the truth. Their son had killed someone. The community they had lived in now looked at them with a mixture of pity and suspicion. It was a pain they could not escape. Wayland, Massachusetts, had always been thought of as a safe, quiet town. But in the summer of 2011, it became the center of national news. Reporters camped outside the courthouse, headlines spread across TV screens, and people all over America asked the same question. How could this happen? Experts weighed in. Some said the tragedy was a warning about dating violence among teens, how controlling or jealous behavior in relationships can sometimes turn deadly. Others focused on Nate's mental health, asking if football injuries, depression, or untreated illnesses had played a role. But no matter how many theories were discussed, one fact remained. Lauren was gone. Her friends organized vigils, concerts, and scholarships in her memory. They wanted her life to mean something more than just the way it ended. And slowly, her name became linked not just to tragedy, but to hope. A symbol that reminded people to speak up about toxic relationships, to seek help, and to never ignore warning signs. For the town, the case became a lesson. Parents started paying closer attention to their children's relationships. Schools invited speakers to talk about healthy breakups and the dangers of jealousy. Wayland, once known for its quiet streets, now carried a scar and a responsibility to learn from it. But even as the community tried to heal, Nate was not done with the courts. He and his lawyers began filing appeals, hoping to find some way to reduce his sentence. Which meant the story of Nathaniel Fujita was far from finished. In the years after the guilty verdict, Nate's defense team looked for cracks in the trial. They argued about evidence, about the jury, about his mental health. Each appeal was like reopening a wound for Lauren's family, who had to relive the horror over and over. In 2014, the case reached the Massachusetts Supreme Judicial Court. The issue at hand wasn't about Nate's guilt or innocence. It was about whether the names of jurors should be released to the public. The court ruled that juror identities are usually public unless there's a good reason to keep them private. For Nate, it wasn't the outcome he hoped for. His conviction stood. But time passed and still his lawyers kept fighting. Then in 2024, more than a decade after the murder, Nate's name was back in the news. From prison, he was requesting a new trial. His attorneys claimed new evidence and new arguments about his mental state could change everything. For Lauren's family, it was a nightmare all over again. They had worked so hard to heal, to remember Lauren with joy instead of sorrow. But with every new court filing, the pain came rushing back. The public reaction was divided. Some people wondered, was Nate truly mentally ill? Did the system fail to recognize it? Others were firm. No matter what his mental state, he had planned and carried out a brutal murder. He deserved to stay in prison. As of today, Nate remains behind bars. His appeals have not freed him. But the fact that he continues to fight shows just how long the shadow of a crime can stretch. Because while the world may move on, for the families caught in it, the past never fully goes away. The story of Nathaniel Fujita and Lauren Astley is more than just a crime story. It is a lesson, one that parents, teachers, and young people are still learning from. If you made it this far, you clearly love true crime. So go ahead and subscribe. More stories are dropping very soon. One lesson is about relationships. Breakups are painful, especially for teenagers who may feel like their world is falling apart. But pain should never turn into control or violence. Experts now use Lauren's story to teach young people how to recognize unhealthy patterns, jealousy, possessiveness, and anger that explodes when someone says no. Another lesson is about mental health. Nate showed signs of depression and strange behavior before the crime. His family even noticed. But the help he needed either wasn't enough or didn't come in time. Could therapy, medication, or intervention have saved Lauren's life? We'll never know. And finally, the biggest lesson is about how quickly lives can change. In just a few minutes, a young man with a bright future destroyed 2 families, scarred a community, and took away a girl who had so much ahead of her. Lauren Astley is remembered not for how she died, but for how she lived. For her smile, her voice, her kindness. Her parents created programs in her honor to prevent teen dating violence, determined to turn pain into purpose. As for Nathaniel Fujita, his story is one of wasted potential. Once a football star with dreams of college, now a prisoner with nothing but regret and endless time. The town of Wayland will never forget that summer. And neither should we. Because stories like this remind us that even in the safest places, even among the people we trust the most, darkness can be hiding. And if we don't pay attention, if we don't act when we see the signs, tragedy can strike again. The murder of Lauren Astley didn't just devastate 2 families. It shook an entire community. Wayland, Massachusetts, had always been described as peaceful, safe, and ordinary. But after July 2011, that reputation was shattered. Suddenly, parents were afraid to let their teenagers out of sight. Neighbors who once waved to each other now whispered in fear. At vigils, candles flickered against the night sky as hundreds gathered to remember Lauren. Friends sang songs in her honor, their voices breaking with tears. Posters, flowers, and handwritten notes piled up in places she had loved to visit. Her school became a place of both mourning and reflection. Reporters swarmed the town, replaying the story on national television. Headlines painted Wayland as the home of a tragedy no one could explain. People who had never met Lauren or Nate debated their story in living rooms across America. For many teenagers, the crime was especially frightening. Lauren and Nate were their age. They went to the same kinds of parties, classes, and football games. If something like this could happen to them, it could happen anywhere. Teachers began speaking more openly about dating violence and mental health. School counselors invited students to share their struggles. Community leaders admitted they hadn't always noticed the warning signs. The entire town seemed to be asking, what could we have done differently? But for Lauren's parents, Gil and Mary Astley, grief was mixed with determination. They refused to let their daughter's name be remembered only as a victim. They started giving talks, creating programs, and raising awareness about teen dating violence. They wanted to save other families from experiencing the nightmare they had lived through. Still, there were wounds that no program could heal. Lauren's friends struggled with nightmares. Some couldn't walk past the marsh where her body was found without feeling sick. Even years later, people who lived in Wayland still described that summer as the moment everything changed. The shock of the crime left behind a silent truth. When love twists into control and heartbreak becomes obsession, even the safest communities can be shattered. While Wayland mourned, Nathaniel Fujita's life took a very different turn. At just 20 years old, Nate was sentenced to life in prison without parole. The boy who once dreamed of college football now woke up every morning to the clang of steel doors. His world shrank to a concrete cell, prison meals, and long, endless hours of reflection. In prison, Nate was no longer the football star, no longer the popular teen. He was inmate number W100454, one of thousands serving time. Reports suggest that Nate struggled in his early years behind bars. He was young, unprepared for the reality of prison, and carrying the weight of his crime. For many, it was justice served. For others, it was a haunting picture of wasted potential. His attorneys continued to file appeals. They argued about his mental state, about whether his depression and possible psychosis should have been given more weight. They claimed brain injuries from football might have damaged his thinking. But none of it freed him. And yet, Nate refused to stop trying. In 2024, more than a decade after the crime, he asked for a new trial. He wanted another chance. Another opportunity to argue his side. But what about Lauren? She would never get another chance. Never go to college, never sing on stage again, never live the life that had been stolen from her. This contrast, Lauren's permanent silence and Nate's continued fight, left many feeling angry. To them, Nate's appeals reopened old wounds. Every headline dragged Lauren's parents back into the nightmare. Behind prison walls, Nate may have lost his freedom. But his story still lingered in the courts, in the news, and in the hearts of those who remembered Lauren. More than a decade has passed since that summer night in 2011. But the story of Nathaniel Fujita and Lauren Astley is still told, not just as a crime, but as a warning. Lauren is remembered as a girl full of life, laughter, and dreams. Her parents created the Lauren Astley Memorial Fund, a foundation that supports education, healthy relationships, and the arts, things Lauren herself loved deeply. Through this work, her spirit lives on. Every year, events are held in her memory. Students are taught to recognize the red flags of toxic relationships. Communities are reminded that jealousy and control are never signs of love. In this way, Lauren's story continues to save lives, even though hers was taken. As for Nathaniel Fujita, his name now carries a different meaning. Once celebrated as a star athlete, he is remembered as a cautionary tale, a reminder that even people who seem to have everything can make choices that destroy it all. His life is no longer measured in touchdowns, but in years served behind prison walls. Thanks for watching till the end. If you want more true crime stories just like this, hit that subscribe button and join our community. The case leaves us with painful but important lessons. That love can never justify violence. That mental health struggles must be taken seriously. And that ignoring warning signs can have deadly consequences. In the end, this story is not just about a crime. It's about two lives, one lost and one wasted. It's about a town forever changed. And it's about the importance of speaking out before heartbreak turns into tragedy. Lauren's smile, captured in photos, remains frozen in time. Her voice, once so full of promise, will never be heard again. But her legacy is powerful. Through her story, others may be spared. And that is why we tell this story. Not to sensationalize, not to exploit, but to remember and to warn. Because behind every tragedy is a chance to learn. And behind every loss is a reason to make sure it never happens again.